Hi, welcome to the fourth episode of Guitars in the Wild, where we're making an acoustic and a ukulele out in the wild. I'm not doing that. It's freezing out there. What are you, crazy? It's freezing out there. It's cold in the air and I got the heater going on. What do you want? Look, the Guitars in the Wild thing, it's gone off the rails, all right? I blame the management. Anyway, we got a really cool episode. We're going to thin the tops, we're going to do the bracing, and then we're going to voice the guitar. So it's a really, really important episode, really good stuff. Let's get to work. So the first thing we have to do is thickness the soundboards. At first I was pretty nervous about doing this without a thickness sander and using hand planes because I'm not really the best at it. But it turned out to be one of my favorite things to do. Now how thin you want to go is really up to each luthier. An average is about 2.5 to 3.5 millimeters. But every piece of wood is different and it's up to each luthier and each guitar maker to determine what's best for each individual board. Now there are several ways that people might want to measure this. You can go for a very scientific approach or you can go for something that's very intuitive. One of the things that people do is they measure deflection. So the way of doing this is you take your top and you would put it between two boards and you would add a known weight and then you would put it in the middle and you would measure the deflection, just how much the top is sinking into the top. And you'll write that down, and what a lot of guitar builders will do is they'll have a standard deviation, a standard amount of flexibility that they want in their tops. It's different for different builders. It's up to you whether you want to go that route. Another thing that they'll do is they'll do it in that direction, and then they'll do it along the length of the guitar as well. And so they'll put it here, put a standard weight there, and then they'll measure the amount of deflection. And when they get to the right standard deflection that works for them in the designs of their guitars, then that's how they'll do it. There are other ways of doing it through imaging. You can get as scientific as you want on this, or you can kind of sort of just go by feel. The important thing to keep in mind is that the more flexible the top becomes, the more you flex that, the lower the pitch of the top is going to be. If you go too low, what you're going to wind up doing is getting a very muddy sound because there's not going to be enough overtones, higher overtones. It's like a string that's too loose, a drum head that's too loose. It's going to start flubbing out. It's unbelievably thin. It's hard to believe this is going to withstand the pull of the strings, but I mean, it's pretty crazy. But I think I'm going to stop there. This is about 2.5 millimeters on average. I think I'm going to stop there. I can't believe this thing is going to not collapse as soon as I put some strings on it. I still have to kind of sort of like sand the top, resurface the top a bit. So I'm going to leave it a little bit thick in the idea that I'll probably lose another 0.1 or 0.2 millimeters as I kind of sort of finish this up. So as soon as I was done, I started making the braces. This will be glued to the back and the top for support and voicing the guitar. These braces usually have an arc to them to give the soundboards a curved shape. This is especially true for the back that has a deeper curvature. The radius affects the tone and gives the back and the top additional strength. But for this guitar, I didn't want to commit to a radius dish because I wasn't sure exactly how much of a radius I wanted to go with. So I basically just decided to carve them by hand. So later on that night, I couldn't help myself. And in the middle of the night, I went out there and started carving the backs of the guitars. It was a good night, cold, listening to the sound of the wind in the wood. Morning. Got late last night. This daylight savings time, or whatever the hell we call whatever we're in now, sucks. Even though I kind of sort of like working in the dark, there's nothing like allowing the lights to get a little bit low and kind of sort of working on stuff, especially when you're using hand tools. Probably not the best when you're using power tools, but it's actually kind of sort of nice when something mellow about the whole vibe working in kind of sort of semi-darkness. I kind of sort of like it. But anyway, good morning. All right, so bracing, lots of stuff to cover here. Let's start off with bracing patterns, right? And what the function of bracing is. There's basically two functions. Bracing is number one, the first and foremost is in order to support the structure and the pull of the strings, right? And so that's a large part of why it is that we need the bracing structure. It also is able to help us develop the voice of the guitar, right? So by the way you can sort of, the way you design the bracing, the way the bracings are laid out are going to affect how the tone is. Now I went with the regular, what's called the X bracing pattern, which is like the typical sort of thing. And the reason for that was because even though I'd like to experiment with other bracing patterns, this type of bracing actually is common enough that I can judge it by my experience playing other guitars. So each bracing pattern is going to give you a completely different thing. So this is the X Martin type, and then the ukulele actually has a kind of sort of variation of the A bracing, but it kind of sort of goes in the opposite direction, which is interesting. Usually the A bracing is this way. I think this is a Akashic sort of bracing pattern that this is working with. Usually the A bracing pattern is going to give you more volume. It's going to give you more projection, whereas Martin tends to be more warmth. It depends a lot on how you voice it. So another thing is about building that mental library, especially with the first few builds. But I think with every build, this is not a bad practice. What I did was I sounded the top a lot. Once I thicknessed the top, I sat there and I listened. I spent a good amount of time listening to the result that I got, like what it was sounding like. And then what I did is, as I put each brace on the guitar, I would listen to what it did. So I put the X braces on, and then I spent a little bit amount of time tapping it, trying to remember what the tonality of the top was and what it sounds like now. Like, what is the X brace doing to that? And then I ended the transverse brace, and I listened to what that was doing to it. Then I put the other side braces. And with each brace that I glued in, I would sit there and I would tap the guitar, I would listen to what it was doing. I'd see the changes that each brace was making and how it affected the tone. Again, just trying to build that library, that mental library of experiences that I can draw from in the future, and try to learn as much as I can from each one of these, from each build that I make. The way I like to think of it, if the top is a drum head, right, then these are kind of sort of the tuners on the drum head. The more tension there is in the top, the more higher frequencies you're going to accentuate. The looser the top is, the more bass response you're going to get. It's all about finding that balance, right, and getting the best sound you can out of each top, and trying to voice it and steer it in the direction that you think is what you're going for. Now, well, I'm going to start carving and then we can kind of sort of talk about that. So here's the thing about voicing a guitar. Whether you're going for a more analytical, measurement-based approach or a more intuitive, traditional approach, I think it's ultimately more of an intuitive approach, informed by measurements. That's the better way. And that's because the final result will always be based on taste, and what works for one person may not be the thing for another. That puts lutherie squarely in the realm of art. So that being said, I think it's really important to have a vision, an end goal that you are aiming for. I know what's driving me to work on acoustics is the same thing that drives me to work on electric guitars. It's not that there aren't amazing guitars out there already. It's that I want a sound, a vibe, a feel that I can't seem to find anywhere else, but I can imagine in my mind. I guess it's ultimately just a search for sound. Yeah, it ends there because I lost a whole bunch of footage. It took me forever to kind of sort of patch this thing together with the footage that I had left over. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, like and subscribe. I just wanted to give a quick reminder. The Elements Guitar Series, where I'm giving away 2 electrics, that's still ongoing. There's still time to sign up for that. And yeah, thanks for being here. Peace out.